Welcome, everybody. This is Faith, Family, and Freedom. 3F, Faith, Family, and Freedom. My name is Bobby Allison.
I'm Mateo.
Brenton. Or do you just want to go, is it like a Madonna thing?
Yeah, kind of mononymic, if I'm using that word
I like it. I feel
properly.
I feel some slightly emasculated. I mean, is it a...
I'll tell you why I do it is I feel like the Mateo and the Brenton aren't super smooth together. I like Mateo. That's what I usually go by. That's what people know me as.
When I think Mateo, I think some suave Latin American hottie. And then Brenton, some pasty...
Me.
Yeah. Some pasty white guy.
Exactly. Exactly. So when you put them together, I don't think it has the same flow. So it might seem a little pretentious to go one name, but that's why I tend to separate them. And if I'm ever using two names, it's usually something more legal that's going on. So I'm using Matthew anyway.
Your government name.
Yes.
No, I like it. So Bobby Allison.
Mateo.
3F is a psychologist and theologian providing a much-needed commentary on the three most essential elements of life: faith, family, and freedom.
3F is a project that we decided to start. We felt called by God to present an alternate media to hopefully replace legacy media that seems to have let us down. I feel called to speak to Christians of all stripes. I think Matthew would agree that we want to speak to Christians of all stripes, people of all stripes. Give people a place to come and talk about faith topics, family topics, freedom topics. And this is our first try, essentially, at launching this idea that we feel God's in it with us.
Absolutely. Now, can I ask for a little bit of clarity, both for myself and maybe the listeners, on two of the points you just made?
Sure.
When you say replace legacy media, does that mean that this blows up so much that there is no need for a CNN, an MSNBC, a Fox News? They will just be utterly replaced? Or do you mean this will provide a different outlet of that kind of information outside of those others? Or am I off on both counts there?
I would say it's a little bit of both, and maybe something slightly adjacent to what you're thinking.
Okay.
I mean, let's face it, the legacy media has taken their masks off pretty much. I mean, they're presenting narratives, they're presenting biases that I would suggest even leftists can kind of acknowledge, if they're honest. Mm-hmm. So with 3F, I would like to essentially kind of just present an honest broker's approach to what's happening around us, to what faith concerns we have, what family concerns we have, and what freedom related concerns we have in an honest broker fashion, such that people can come here and know that we're not trying to force a narrative that's essentially looking for some sort of secondary gain. And my calculation, I think the media, as we see it now, it's power. You know, they want to replace conservatives. They want to replace Christians. They want to or discourage the proliferation of their ideas. Mm-hmm. The way I see it. So, and if we replace them, great. If we present an alternate viewpoint and an alternate place to go, that you know that you're getting a good fact-based, faith-based, honest broker-based approach, then I think eventually probably we will replace them. Because I mean, how could you essentially run a very essential regime or essential idea as a media and be dishonest? Just eventually that will weed itself out.
And then on the second point, before circling back to media, you said Christians of all stripes. I'm assuming that is all denominations, liberal, moderate, conservative.
Yeah, essentially. We have a huge Christian community. I mean, you could even throw, Mormons and Catholics in on that regard. Anybody that believes in Christ, this is a place where you're going to hear about Christ. Mm-hmm. And I don't want to turn anybody away.
Yeah. We're not targeting a specific niche in the Christian community. It's meant for the Christian community as a body, as it should be.
Yeah. I would appreciate it if an atheist wanted to watch this and get a sense of what we think about God and what the Bible says about God. We're not pastors, per se. I mean, we're not pastors at all, I should say. You may feel called to do something like that in the future. But we're, as of now, we're just regular guys with a background that's specific that we can come to talk about these things in an honest broker's fashion, so to speak, if that makes sense.
Yes. No, that does make sense. And I think another thing we've talked about, along with being a replacement media, is really trying to form a community of sorts, as a place where people can come together, not just in this podcast, but through some of our forums.
Exactly. Yeah.
To meet, I want to say, for like-minded people to gather. Like you said, we are still interested in opposing viewpoints that want to tune in, but I think we do want to create a community of people that have similar passions and thoughts and are looking for a place that these issues can be discussed.
Yeah, I agree. I agree that we're stronger together, and I think we have such a we have so many communities of faith that seem to exist adjacent each other, and we cross paths, frequently, but we don't get together enough. We don't
celebrate our commonalities so much. Sometimes we get hung up on the areas where we differ. Oh, you believe in election. We believe in free will.
Yeah.
You believe in a pre-tribulation rapture. We believe in post-trib, and the Christian community gets all divided and hung up on these issues rather than focusing on the things that we do agree on. Technically, sadly, an American society that is growing more and more secular and defensive towards Christianity. And
the Washington Post article recently. So speaking of a leftist organization, actually doing some research, they posted an article recently that less than 50% of Americans now consider themselves Christians or regularly attending Christians of a church or a gathering that where they're focused on faith in Jesus. That's a huge departure from even as early as the 90s, when as much as 70% of Americans identified as a regularly attending Christian. So we're losing the battle to more of a secular idea. And I think it's because we're not passionately engaged with each other in a format like this, where we talk about God, we talk about faith, family, and freedom. Essentially, we're not engaging each other. We're not talking about the questions that we have, asking the questions, and essentially kind of geeking out about Christ. Talking about our faith in a way that's outside of church, that shows that we truly do believe, and that we truly have our faith in a very important place in our walk. So
yeah, I regret that I can't quote the source, but I just read the other day that 70% of high school graduates that claim Christianity at the point of graduation, 70% of those will leave the Christian faith within 10 years of graduating high school. So that's 7 out of 10 self-professed Christian high school graduates will walk away from the faith within 10 years of graduating high school. Now, a big part of that, and I guess I'm getting a little bit off of media here and just branching temporarily into academia.
Oh, we'll get there.
And then we can pull it back to media. But a lot of that is higher numbers of people are going to to college nowadays, higher number of high school graduates, and they're being indoctrinated into anti-Christian,
Right.
Liberal progressive ideologies.
Well, not only college, but out into the community, out into the workplace.
Good point. Right.
Oftentimes God is not allowed in the workplace. How many people have been fired for saying God bless? How many people have been reprimanded for saying Merry Christmas, for goodness sake? Something that's not even faith central.
Meanwhile, as you carry your box of goods from your desk out of the building that you've been fired from, you cross the Muslim who's kneeling on their mat, praying. And that's nothing against Muslims, but the point being, it's sort of like everything's okay except Christianity.
Exactly.
In the workplace.
And then there's the misinterpretation of the separation of church and state, which seems to have been perpetrated upon the population to suggest that when you're out of church, don't talk about Christ. When you're entering into the workforce now, you're essentially you're expected to be as far away from God as though you're on the college campus. And
that's a good point. In a lot of places, there are some good small businesses out there, and a few large businesses with Christian leadership and Christian bosses. But you're right; it's fewer and far between.
Oh, especially on the college campuses, we have some good faith-centered colleges in this country, but you get outside of those, then you get that dynamic where the Christian format is dissuaded and all other minority formats are encouraged.
And then to circle it back to media and maybe the media's role in that, I'm remembering when Don Lemon made the statement in one broadcast. He said, Jesus himself admitted that he wasn't perfect. And I'm just like, if that's your thought, you've kind of missed the whole point of the book, the whole point of the incarnation. Gosh. By the book, I mean the Bible, obviously. But when someone on mainstream media, legacy media, can make such a glaring Christian mistake, that's not good news for where our...
And to my mind, that's not the only time Don Lemon has stepped on that proverbial landmine.
Have there been other times?
There was one where he, let's put it this way. Let's come up with we owe it to our listeners to come up with a montage of extremely inappropriate media commentary. Don Lemon will probably be the star of that.
Oh, absolutely.
But I know some of his colleagues and definitely on leftist media have definitely stepped on that landmine several times. And they don't even see it as a landmine. They see it as it's part of their narrative. I think when you get rid of God, it's just like Germany in the 20s and 30s. When you eliminate God, you eliminate the moralistic framework necessary to avoid a very scary regime that will come in and take over and perpetrate essentially World Wars 1 and 2.
Let me ask this in relation to media. CNN clearly has an agenda today. Like you said, the mask is off. There's no hiding it. Some people and some Christians are still missing it. And I don't mean to belittle anyone when I say this, but it really concerns me today when a Christian doesn't have either just the awareness of what's going on or the discernment to realize that they're being hosed by CNN and presented with an agenda that does not mesh with the Christian agenda and movement. I think that's safe to say, but can we call what CNN is doing propaganda, or is it just that there is a clear agenda as opposed to journalists used to make it a point to be neutral and just present the news from a neutral standpoint? Have they crossed over into propaganda, or are they just presenting an agenda and the fault is that they pretend there's not an agenda there as opposed to saying that we do have an agenda? Where do you think that divide sits right now?
We'll definitely have to probably adapt an entire show on this topic. Essentially, the media has always been a complicated entity when it comes to narrative and what they're trying to do. I mean, there's stories of even back during the Spanish Civil War, for instance, the New York Times was downplaying the importance or the brutality of the Spanish Civil War. And then individual, and if I don't recall the story correctly or accurately from this point currently, but there were reporters that had to essentially go over and expose what was really happening. And then you fast forward to, the lead up to the Iraq War and weapons of mass destruction, how the media played various roles on either side of the aisle regarding that debacle. And then the last 4 years with the supposed involvement of Russia in the elections and the compromising of our president that turned out to be totally false. Yet the media pushed it for 4 years mercilessly. I think it's beyond propaganda at this point. I think they're trying to set policy, which is why and that's very scary to me. And I feel like it's, our media is supposed to question those that set policy. The fourth estate, correct? That's what they're often labeled. Various presidents have called them the fourth estate because they're an establishment necessity to question power. Yet now you see, for instance, recently the police chief in Minneapolis, after the shooting of one of the latest shootings in Minneapolis, tried to call what we were seeing riots, and the media immediately in front of him were saying, "Don't say that. Don't go there. They're not riots. It's peaceful protests." Or when you see media trying to essentially block out real data to mislead their audience as to what's really happening, editing out the knife that Michaela Bryant was using to essentially stab a victim before she was shot by a cop herself. And so you see them almost trying to make policy now, calling a crisis a serious concern at the border, the southern border of the United States, where we have an influx of individuals coming in, children wandering the desert alone, and yet the media refuses to call it a crisis. So they're setting policy.
And I think that's where I tend to think of CNN almost more as propaganda now than just another opinion. Is like you said, when you edit out the knife, you're to me, that's propaganda. You are presenting a story the way you want to present it for a desired end. It's different than showing the whole video with the knife and then giving it your spin or opinion. To me, that's more honest. You might just have a different opinion, but when you're caught editing out the knife or not even presenting the Hunter Biden laptop story, as opposed to presenting it, but then putting your liberal spin on it. And I think a lot of times when I'm speaking on my frustrations with the media, or if it seems like I'm picking on CNN, I usually go to CNN, and rarely do I even bring up MSNBC, because in my mind, they're being just more honest about who they are. Maybe I'm wrong and I'm not familiar enough, but I don't agree with them. But I feel like people know that MSNBC is bringing a leftist spin to things. People know that Fox is bringing a conservative spin. Those are your big two. But CNN, I think, still has fooled a lot of people, and sadly is fooling a lot of Christians into thinking that they are this neutral point in the middle. But to me, that makes CNN more dangerous than MSNBC, because people think, I'm moderate. I'm not an extremist. Right. I've heard Christians say, I'm not an extremist, so I don't watch that Fox News. It's too much for me. And they think they're almost doing the Christian thing by watching CNN because it's moderate. And that's where I think they've been grossly misinformed, and if possibly deceived, I don't think is too strong of a word.
Right. Outright deception. I mean, the mask has come off. The Obama years did a lot of weird things in this country. I think it emboldened the left. It emboldened the media. They thought they'd never lose again. And then Trump, I think, was a huge existential crisis. So you could say like a midlife crisis for the media. So they threw the baby out with the bathwater. They got rid of the wife. They went for the Corvette and the hot little thing down the street. The media took their masks off big time. We saw. I remember, during the Obama years, I'd actually listen. I would listen to CNN oftentimes to get more of a straight and narrow view, whereas Fox News would give a conservative side and MSNBC would give a liberal side. So I'd often go to CNN just to get the straight scoop. And then during Trump, that changed drastically.
And I think, if we go so far as to say, and I have felt this, some Christians will disagree with me, but that God was actually using Trump and he was a tool for God. I think part of that was to expose things and take the mask off. And people say, well,
how could you be a Christian and support Trump?
Yeah. Or God couldn't use Trump. Look at the way he's talked in his past, but he was the exact person that was needed for these masks to come off and to be the disruptor that it was. I might go one step further to your midlife crisis analogy and say that they actually had a psychotic break is what they had.
Coming into my territory.
They went from emboldened to enraged. So I think the media had a complete psychotic break, but they put a good enough face on that it looks like they're going through a midlife crisis. But if you're behind closed doors, these folks have lost it.
And you can see almost the inner conflict when you watch for instance, like a Brian Stelter who's supposed to actually cover the media, or you watch a Don Lemon, you watch a Chris Cuomo, and you can see the inner turmoil, the conflict within them that, when you've sold your soul, but then you realize that where you're going at the end of the day.
Do you think that's where they are? They just can't get off the boat at this point. They're stuck there. And
yeah, I think it's a similar conundrum when you consider faith and old forms of faith ideology where you can essentially sell your soul. I mean, something that's not a whole lot of Christians would necessarily believe is possible, or whatever it might. It sounds to me like a Catholic type of thing, right? I don't know. This is your territory, but essentially, yeah. Once you go down that road, once you sell that piece of vital property, you can't go back. So you have to fortify it. You have to try to essentially lighten up the devil. You have to make the devil good.
Delude yourself into,
or misery loves company. Draw everybody else in. That way, hey, there's safety in numbers down there in that fiery lake.
That's a curious question with each individual one. Which ones were just tied in too deep and couldn't see how to extricate themselves, and which ones had it in them?
You've seen some of them peel off. They'll emancipate themselves. They'll be sullied in the media. I think it was one of the most recent ones was it Brooke Baldwin?
I'm not
from
familiar.
CNN. I think she was one of the ones that basically came out and said it's a boys' club. Don Lemon and Chris Cuomo, they're a bunch of misogynist dudes that the women at CNN aren't as emphasized, and so they kind of poo-pooed her, and she left, and I think that's the one that left. But so you'll see people that jump ship and try to right themselves, and more power to them. But I think that when you're in that world, it's so intoxicating and so necessary to be part of the cream of the crop, and that's essentially I think it's the utmost of spiritual warfare.
Oh, absolutely.
Because you're lying to the public, you're lying to the people that you're supposed to be serving, and it's really sad.
And another thing I think with some of these news anchors and media personalities, I think it's safe to say, that you and we stand strong in our opinions, and especially as they're expressed on this podcast, people will see that I have set and strong opinions about things, and I might say things that other people would say, wow, he thinks very, very differently from me on this. But I hope, and it's my hope, that I never present something that if somebody stands on the other side of that spectrum, it would come off that he really dislikes me or wouldn't like me because I think otherwise. I hope it always just comes off as, wow, he thinks very differently than me. That being said, when I see some of these rants and tirades on CNN and others, I don't just think, oh, wow, they think very differently than me. I feel like, wow, I think this guy hates me or would hate me personally.
Oh yeah.
And maybe I'm reading it wrong, and there's others that I just think, okay, that person has a very different opinion than me, but I don't necessarily think that person would hate me. But there's some, it's like, wow, there is such vitriol here that I think this person would, just shove me in front of the train themselves if they had the chance.
They'd leave that knife right in the center of your back. You see that in a lot of politicians nowadays too. So, it's just, I think that's when the secular world, begins to, gain a lot of traction and pushing God out. I think that's what we're seeing. And essentially that's the purpose of this podcast. We're trying to gain some ground back, win over a few years, and then try to push a faith-centered, freedom-centered, family-centered podcast that presents essentially as an honest broker. We're not gonna present narratives. We're going to call some stuff out as we see it. A lot of this stuff, in my opinion, is just antichrist, and the media stuff that we see, all the spiritual warfare out there. It's essentially we're on the battlegrounds right now of a really, it's not a kinetic war, but it's getting there.
And when you say antichrist, do you mean it in the sense that
against God? It's not
a last days necessarily, but just that it's against the agenda of God. Yeah. Because antichrist
of
can
course
be used both ways. So
it's anti-God. Like the whole idea of intersectional politics or identity politics. It's anti-God and pro-person. It's like, let's worry about the person and forget about a structure that binds us. So
I fully agree. I think there's very strong spiritual warfare going on behind the scenes right now, and that always has gone on. It always will go on, but
that's true.
Ebbs and flows in the battles, but it feels like it's really strong now, and it's really heavy over America right now and over these mountains, these centers, media, academia, whatnot. So even though the spiritual warfare has gone on since the devil and the fallen angels have fallen, there's something intense about the battle, and there's something that very centered on the battle over not only the world but America. And the media is one of those mountains, those forts, those battlegrounds that's being fought hard for. And Christians, if you don't see the spiritual warfare going on behind this, I think you need to get a little bit more plugged in and ask God to help you see it through those eyes. And that I'm obviously not talking about seeing the battles in the heavenlies, but you have to see the agendas behind it. And if you think it's just taking place in the world without having a spiritual motivation, you're going to be misguided and miss some key things when you're not looking at it through the spiritual eyes as well.
Yeah, definitely. All right, well, let's go ahead and wrap it up for this week, but we'll have more to come on 3F, Faith, Family, and Freedom, as it, I think we should probably definitely adapt an entire show around this topic, spiritual warfare, the role the media plays in that, the role that the church plays in that, the role the church plays in the solution of that.
Absolutely.
The role that a podcast like this, a community that's together, can play in solution.
Amen. I agree.
Amen. All right, guys. Well, thanks for watching. We'll be back before you know it with another podcast and some more clips on faith, family, and freedom. God bless.
God bless. Love you all.
For exclusive content and bonus footage, please subscribe to our Patreon page at patreon.com/3fcommunity. That's patreon.com/3fcommunity. We'd love to have you join the family.